Hello guys, welcome to this pre-algebra class. In this class we focus mainly on the number types. Number types are very important concept in mathematics because then they provide a very good foundation for for other topics like algebra, calculus, and a lot of other very interesting topics. Now, numbers are they're part of our daily lives. We use them, and this is also what we will discuss in this lecture. We will look at the different types of numbers, and then we provide an example and what is not an example. So first, what are the types of numbers? We have whole numbers, we have integers, we have natural numbers, rational numbers, and then we have real numbers, right? So we'll take each and every one of the numbers and then we'll provide an example and what is not an example. So for the first number type, we have the whole number. I will just put the number type here. So this one starts for the whole numbers. Now, whole numbers are generally, positive numbers that, including zero, basically. So it includes zero. It starts from 0, 1, 2, da 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 da. You could have 80 in between. You could have da 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 da. You could have like 1,000 in between, and then you could have da 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 da. And then it goes on and on and on and on. Now, whole numbers are generally numbers that we use on a daily to count discrete items, right? So the discrete items could be like 2 balls, 5 pencils. These items are not items that are going to have like halves or quarters or something like this. So you will not have like 2.5 balls or 2.23 balls. You are going to have 2 balls. You could have like maybe 80 pencils or 76 books, but then you cannot have 76.23 books. So these whole numbers, they lack any sort of like decimals, and also they're not also negative as well. Now, what is not an example? Based on what we have discussed, we do not have a case of something like 3. This is not an example, definitely. We don't have something like -1 or even -1.36. So these are things that are extremely not an example. We cannot have 1.5, for instance. So these are the cases that do not fit. Now we go straight to integers. What is an integer? Now, an integer is so basically an integer is like kind of a superset, like it has more it's a whole number is part of the integer, basically. It's just an extension of what a whole number is, but then it includes negative numbers, right? So you could have in between, you could have minus da 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 da, and then you could have maybe -93. You could have -89. And then you could come here, you could have 0, and then you could come and say 1, 2, da da da, 1,000, da da da. Now, what is not an integer, for instance? Now, an integer is definitely not anything that has some kind of decimal. So you cannot have like 2.50 or -1.50 or -3.90. But then you could have -1. We can already see it. You could have -2, you could have -3, and all this kind of thing, right? So here we have integers, And here we have whole numbers, integers, right? And then the third case, we have natural numbers. This stands for natural numbers, right? Now, what is a natural number? A natural number is just a whole number without the zero, right? So it's everything that is a whole number, but without zero. So a natural number starts from 1, 2, 3, 89, whatever, and then it goes on and on and on, right? But then what is not an example? 0 is not an example, and -1 is not an example, and any other thing that has a decimal is not an example. So any other number that has a decimal or has a fraction is not an example. So it's not an example. Now, the fourth number type is rational numbers, right? So we say rational. I mean, we wouldn't abbreviate this because we also have real numbers. So we have rational numbers. And what is a rational number, for instance? Now, a rational number is just, it's a fraction. It's a fraction where you have like an integer on top as a numerator, and then you have like an integer as a denominator. So this is just what a rational number is. So first you could have like half, you could have like 3/4, you could have like 5/6. I mean, you could also have like 200/100. You could have like 7/2. So, but what is not an example, right? So now, I mean, it's very, very funny, but like some of what is not an example is kind of debatable, right? So why will I say it's debatable? Because I mean, whole numbers could also be represented in fractions, but if they are represented as whole numbers, then they are not an example. However, we have to put at the back of mind that it could also be represented as a fraction. A whole number can also be represented as a fraction here. So basically what I mean is, here you have like, in this case, here you have like 200/100, which is basically 2. Now, 2 is not an example of a rational number, but we know that a rational number could basically be represented in form of a fraction as well. But when it is in a fraction form, then we don't see it as a whole number. We don't see it as a rational number when it's in a fraction point. We see it as a rational number, and when we see it, basically stand alone, then it's a whole number, something else. So basically here you could have 6, you could have 10, and you could have -2, and anything like this, right? So the fifth type of number is the real number. So what is a real number? A real number is just a continuous number. A real number is a continuous number. I mean, so like usually when you take measurement of your height, most of the time it's not precise on 10. I mean, like if you're 10 foot tall, but it's not likely to be precise. So you have like 10.25, 10.3, 10.89, this kind of numbers. Or when you take a measurement of something else, it could basically fall in a different kind of range of numbers. And so here we have numbers that have decimals. So I mean, the difference between a real number and a rational number is kind of it's kind of similar in a way, but it's just that one is represented as a fraction, and then the other is basically represented as a decimal. So here you have 2.25, you have 6.25, you have 7.33, and you could have all these kind of examples. But what is not an example here? I mean, 2 is not an example. But one thing you could know is like 2.00 is an example of a real number. However, 2 is not an example of a real number. And 6 is not an example. And -7 is not an example. And -8 is not an example. And 8.5 is not an example of a real number. So this is these are the differences between what a whole number is, what an integer is, what a natural number or rational or real number is. At least we see like there are some kind of overlaps here and there, but then nothing really adds up. I mean, nothing really nothing is directly equal to each other, if I may put it like that. So you could join me on the next one, where we will actually look, at each number type and what is possible, how to use the different number types. We will just do like a kind of preamble before we deep dive into proper mathematics. Thank you.